They're going to be like, we don't know what you're saying. And then I'm going to be like, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, that's why you need to be a canon lawyer. Canon lawyers will understand. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theo Table, where angels dancing on the head of a pin can change your life. I'm Aiden, also known as Celtic Catholic Fire.
I'm Julie.
I'm Maria.
And I'm Jarek.
With the 4th of July coming up, we thought we should talk about the relationship between Catholicism and the United States.
Our fundamental question for today is, how should we, as Catholics, relate to the U.S., and how should the U.S. relate to us as Catholics?
Now, when you think about America, especially with the 4th of July, stereotypically it's freedom in all caps with a giant eagle flying in the background and fireworks going off, or, I don't know, if you're of a particular political persuasion, Ronald Reagan bearing double AK-47s riding a velociraptor. I might throw that in a YouTube video because I find it a humorous image. But yeah, so basically, the idea of freedom seems to be a particularly American principle almost, that it's been a guiding way that America sees itself for basically all of its existence. This is important to bring up though, because how America sees freedom has changed a lot over the last 2.5 some centuries, and that really does influence how the church and Catholics more generally have interacted with and need to interact with the United States. So I guess maybe a good place to start would be, what does Catholicism think about freedom, and how does that and has that clashed with America in the past?
So it seems like one fundamental distinction between freedom or liberty in the Catholic tradition and freedom or liberty in the American tradition is, at least nowadays, American freedom is like freedom to do something. It's an active freedom which allows you to act in the way you want. Freedom to. Whereas freedom in the Catholic tradition seems to be more like freedom from something. Freedom from sin, freedom from vice, freedom from death, things like that. And so that, I think, essential distinction, you can already see how a conflict could conceivably happen between the two of them. Because sometimes something that makes you freer to do something makes you less free from something, or vice versa.
Yeah. On the distinction Jarek was making, I think it's important to get this in early because you can phrase that a lot of different ways. And the way I've always thought about it is exactly the opposite of what Jarek just said, although we believe, I think, pretty much the same thing, which is a more Catholic conception of liberty would be freedom to something. You have freedom for or to something to be excellent, to do as we would ideally, as God would want us to choose. And I mean, we're free from sin. For freedom, Christ has set you free. And then the more secular understanding of liberty is freedom from having to, freedom from rule and restraint and just choose whatever you want because the power is in the choice. And not necessarily the goodness of what you choose. Like freedom from, as in my terms, freedom to in your terms is license, if you will. And
yeah,
instead of real liberty in the Catholic sense.
Yeah. That maybe a way to phrase it that doesn't hinge on sort of that fine distinction on the from versus the to would be that the Catholic view of liberty is like the ability to be virtuous, the ability to have virtue, to do the right thing. Whereas, at least in the current American understanding, wasn't necessarily always the case, and we can talk about that, but right now the American understanding of freedom is the ability to do whatever you want without being judged or interfered with, basically.
What do you mean when you say that wasn't always the case?
Oh, but because I said this a little while ago that sort of the American founding idea might have been freedom. The freedom in the sense of sort of the founders, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, was not the freedom to be a libertine in the same way you might think of it in a modern sense. With the American Revolution, the American founding, the freedom that the founders were talking about was a freedom that involved rights. Essentially, that the to quote, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That inalienable word is really important. We sort of breeze over it sometimes, but inalienable means
Yeah.
it's something inherent to us that the government cannot interfere with. Our freedom is these rights. We are free.
Not just that our government can interfere with it, nobody at all
Exactly,
can interfere
exactly.
with it. That we can't even interfere.
Yes. That we are free to have life, to have liberty, and to pursue happiness, essentially.
Although I don't understand how that, like, sort of... Because I think people still talk about freedom today as a whole rights thing. Like, I have the right to screw up if I want to. And, like, that's a little bit of a diminution of what you're saying. But it's still tied to an essential idea of rights. Which, actually, if you look at the tradition of the Catholic Church, the idea of, like, a fundamental human right didn't necessarily enter the vocabulary until recently. There was always an idea of fundamental human dignity, but there wasn't this idea of, like, I have this claim, which I am going to exert over you, which allows me to do blah, 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 blah.
I think there's a reason for that. It goes back to Julie's point earlier, actually. That sort of, it's not... fundamental human rights, that idea has sort of changed. Like the idea of liberty and the idea of rights, those have changed in sync. That what you consider right nowadays is much more the right to do what I want, and you can't get in my way.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not really how it was originally.
I think we might. Do we care to make the distinction of positive and negative rights? Because something like, because you talk about how America is founded on freedom, and when you went back to the Declaration of Independence, and the Declaration of Independence, correct me if I'm wrong, it's very right endowing. It's saying, like, you have these rights, but at the same time, it's a piece of paper, an important piece of paper that's given to us. I'm pro Declaration of Independence, just for the record. Thank goodness we have one. But when you have a government, and like you accept the theory of social contract, then our rights, where we get our liberty in the sense and our sense of moral responsibility with choices, if you really stretch it, that's a much different theory of a group of people and the government giving us the choice. Even if we do make reference to God, which some other declarations don't, like the UN Declaration of Human Rights doesn't. I don't think the French version of this does
French
not
Declaration
reference
of Rights of
a higher
Man and
power.
Citizen doesn't either.
And the more Catholic definition of the liberty we were suggesting is based on what Aidan was saying, which is that this is a freedom to be virtuous, and you can't. That standard doesn't exist unless you're referring to something beyond the people somehow giving us these rights. Because, like, I can't give you a right. Collectively, can we give you a right? I don't know. It's two very different ideas.
Well, according to the Declaration of Independence, collectively we can and we do give governments their rights. It says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So I think the question which you're asking, which we should all be asking, is so who gives the rights to the people? Okay, it's an inalienable right. It's the laws of nature and of nature's God, as we read in the first paragraph. So it invites us to call into question, what did the founders think about God and his relationship to us and the morality that stems from that?
Actually, that's an interesting question as well, because talking on near coming up with the 4th of July, there's been a lot of conversation, especially on sort of the more hot-button social issues, about America being a Christian nation. And what that means and to what extent that's true. And I mean, most of the founders were deists. They believed in God and weren't necessarily Christian. One of the signers was Catholic. But
Charles
Carroll's my boy.
Indeed. But
oh, Jarek
the fact
Carroll.
that we all know who that is pretty funny.
Yes.
Only because of Jarek, for the appreciation of those listening at home.
Yes.
The building I live in is named after Charles Carroll and his cousin John Carroll, who was the first bishop of any diocese in the U.S.
Yes. And also the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, which is fun.
Charles, not
Yes,
John.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, to my point, I wonder to what extent, in what way is America a Christian nation, especially for us as Catholics, because there's been a lot of really bad blood in American history between Protestants and just the American government more generally and Catholics. Yeah, so as Catholics, we sort of have a unique perspective on this. So what do y'all think?
Julie, it looks like you have thoughts.
I am resisting the urge
Wait,
to rant about
wait.
the state of New York. And
Wait,
its
wait, wait, wait.
conflicts. Maria, you go.
Maria, it looks
Can
like
I
you
can
have
I
thoughts.
can I start with that terrible quote from the newspaper I read you guys earlier?
Okay.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah.
So, basically, since the conception of the United States of America, Catholics have been, at least at the time, they were considered a minority and hated minority because so popular thought went, because they owed allegiance to the Catholic Church as a whole, and that's where they got their understanding of morality from. They were not able to be good, fully participatory citizens. They would always shaft the United States in favor of the Catholic Church if push came to shove.
And they even said this when John F. Kennedy was a candidate for president. They were still afraid that he'd be some sort of papal minion or something, like, Lord knows exactly what they were afraid of. But even into the 1960s, there was this anti-Catholic, to a degree, paranoia, especially regarding the Pope.
Wait, real fast, Despicable Me, I think, has killed the gravity of the word minion because all I can think of is the little yellow guys going, ba, 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 banana. And if JFK was a minion of the Pope, I don't want him to be anything else because he looks great in overalls.
Oh, JFK looks great in overalls.
Oh.
Welcome to
And
Theo
being
Table,
bright
ladies
yellow.
and gentlemen. Welcome to Theo Table.
Sorry, but Maria, I interrupted
Wait.
you.
Oh, no, you're good. I had a quote, but I have a quote that goes off your point, so it's a better quote. If it's a quote of your quote. So in the 1960s, JFK gave a speech in front of a convention of Southern Baptist ministers, and he was basic because they had been castigating him in various forms of media, and he was basically like, "Nah, bro, like, I'm gonna vote my conscience when it comes to issues that's best serve the American people, and I'm not taking directives from the Pope. I'm taking it from my conscience and my experience as a political leader." And in response, Dr. Ramsey Pollard, president of the Southern Baptist Convention in
and
1960,
somehow British.
said, yeah, right. He was Texan. He carried guns. What can we say? He said, no matter what John F. Kennedy might say, he cannot separate himself from his church if he is a true Catholic. Go fetch. What do you guys think about that?
I mean,
I think this might tie into your New York rant, Julie.
yeah, and just to avoid the very specific New York rant, I might cover that ground in a more general format.
Hey! Hey! Mate, I can do it narratively.
Yay! With accents?
Tell us the story, Julie.
Okay.
You don't want me to do a New York accent, but Aiden, we'll
No, please don't.
we'll save it. I'll save it.
Okay.
Aiden can go. You are spared for now.
You're
I
welcome.
love the state of New York, by the way. Just it and Catholics sometimes. Oh, Aiden, go like
Yes,
yes.
everyone at home, you're welcome. But no, to Maria's point, I think it's really informative, sort of, about Catholics in America right now. That even like 50 years ago, it was, oh, the Catholics are going to be too loyal to the Pope. They won't like serve the best needs of the country. They'll choose their religion over their country every time. Why can't we be more like that nowadays? Like, dead
Thank
serious.
you. We go from Al Smith
Believe it
to
or not.
Mario Cuomo. Just saying. One of them, like, got one of them probably didn't get elected president because the man was a Catholic, and the next one, like, can't, like, sets abortion and pro-life issues back in this country because he's a Catholic and makes stupid choices and wasn't loyal to his church.
And actually, along those lines, like, there's a reason why in a lot of Catholic churches you have an American flag in there. And, like, if you ask people from other countries, they're like, what? You have an American flag in your... I personally don't. But I've been to a lot of churches that do.
I have a serious question.
Do you guys not have church?
No, I have an objection. Yeah. So, backstory, I wanted to be Protestant for a while when I was in high school. I seriously wanted to be Protestant. I was pursuing these things. And I thought it was a big deal that, like, Baptist churches oftentimes, and many Protestant denominations, but especially Baptists, seemed like to me in my high school research, had a flag in church. And I was actually it was one of the things that attracted me to the Catholic Church, is that I had never seen that in a Catholic church.
Yeah.
And I looked into, like, why you might not do that, and I was really pleased. And it really speaks to this topic today, because having a flag in a church very much speaks to
Well, a Vatican
Like
flag.
how these two things should interact.
Yeah.
No, an American
that's
flag.
the
A
thing.
Vatican flag, sure.
But
Well, right,
a lot of
that's
Catholic
the point.
churches have a Vatican flag on one side and an American flag on the other side to
I've
represent
never
that they
seen
can
that.
serve both the Pope and the U.S. faithfully.
Where have you seen that?
Okay,
I've never seen that in a
I've seen
church.
them
I've
all
seen that
over the country.
okay,
like in a
You've
church
never
parking
seen-
lot or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
on a flagpole, but I've never seen it in
there's
a
a
church.
big difference.
Yeah, I've seen it like in the sanctuary of the church on
What?
a flagpole.
No.
Yeah.
I've
No.
never seen these. Like,
Yeah.
the Basilica at Notre Dame does this on the outside. A couple of churches I know of do this on the outside, where you have a Vatican flag and an American flag. It's in that case, it's like a school. It's like showing the
Yeah.
like we're part of the nation, but we also are part of the Universal Catholic Church.
But
Yeah.
we used to be French, eh?
No, don't get me started on the French. But no, having a flag in the sanctuary, though, the objects in the sanctuary
don't.
all have meaning of worship. They all point you towards God and towards heaven. And so having patriotic symbols, or like, there's some examples of when teams win the Super Bowl, churches will like deck out their churches in sports team memorabilia, which has the exact same problem, that everything in the church should direct you to God. And if you're putting this stuff if you're putting a patriotic symbol, or like a symbol of your country, or a symbol of a team in the sanctuary, you are turning that into your god.
Hey, I bet we could get
Yeah,
more
yeah,
people
yeah.
in the Basilica if we were to put golden helmets, or the Notre Dame's golden helmets in there.
Oh man.
Oh,
Guys, the priest at my grandparents' church, it's a Catholic church they're in Pennsylvania, has a Pittsburgh Steelers stole that he wears whenever they win a game or if they're playing that Sunday.
Ugh.
And
Oh,
it's just
dear.
like, there's like liturgical abuse, and then there's like liturgical abuse with the capital L. Like, it's just so blatant, and that's the homily about football scores, and everyone's cool with it, and it just kills my soul.
oh,
Maybe this is the
Yeah, that's
last
hard.
anecdote for a while, but something else that we thought of when Jarek was mentioning flags in a church. I was in Boston one time for right around the 4th of July, and I was thinking, this was a very messed up, liturgical abuse, capital L's, like, it was sad. I think the homily was outright the point of the homily was, hey, Catholics, America, what do? This was rocky, Boston, we have lots of history, so I'm going to tell you today, as your priest, you should ignore the church. You should ignore teaching, like, just because I don't care if, like, the Pope is reading the catechism from the lectern, like, you, as American Catholics, have to exercise your political freedoms and liberties, and don't just be, like, hive mind to the church. But I thought of this because I was thinking of how grateful I was that we don't often sing hymns that mix the two. That there's, like, 3, like, patriotic hymns or so, and it's, like, what are they? I forgot them. That's what made me think of it, though. It's like, my country 'tis of thee in
Yeah.
church. Like, I don't like it when you sing the Star.
Yeah.
I've heard people sing the Star Spangled Banner in church. And I
Or
don't
the
know,
one I've heard
just-
more often is like the Navy song. I don't remember what in the world is that
The
song.
shores
Navy?
of Montezuma to the hills of...
You can put
Not
the
that
two
one.
together. You can put. This is an actual point, and then we can get, like, back to other subjects. But you can be an American Catholic. You can be a Catholic American. But I'm not sure when I'm in church, when I'm in a Catholic church. This was the point Aiden was speaking to before about Mass and worship. I am there because I'm a Catholic, and the fact that I could see that same Mass if I were to go to Canada, if I were to go to Timbuktu, I would see the same Mass. So I don't need to be reminded so much that I'm an American when I'm in church, and I would rather not be, because I love Catholicism, because it would be the same if I went to Timbuktu. It is universal, and I think I just really
That's
appreciate
what Catholic
that.
means.
Okay, Aiden.
Yeah.
And that goes to a point that I wanted to touch on, is that our country, I love it, God bless it, it is a man-made social historical construct, if you will. The mystical body of Christ, the Catholic Church, is a mystery at the core of it. We read in the Gospel, in John's Gospel, right, that the soldier pierced the side of Christ and blood and water flowed from it, and it evokes, like, Adam and Eve and the outpouring of one's spouse. It's the mystical bride of Christ.
Yeah.
And that transcends time and history. The United States is fantastic. I love it. I'm proud to be an American, but it does not transcend history. It's not always going to be there. And so,
Yes.
yeah, that's just my little rant right
No,
there.
absolutely.
Wanted to get that in.
Absolutely. I love that
Yeah.
so much, Maria. And that reminds me of something just as a Catholic, you have to have this perspective, and there's a great Catholic theology of patriotism I feel like we should talk about. But the Catholic way
Yeah.
to approach patriotism is informed by this one key idea, and that's that you will outlive your country. That one way or another, your country will pass away someday.
Ooh.
You will
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
You are
That's-
eternal. Everyone in your country will live on eternally, one way or the other. Your country will
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's a mind-blowing perspective shift.
Yeah.
It's something we don't
Yeah.
think about at all.
I feel like we especially have that mind frame because we are relatively young. Like, America has had an amazing. We're young enough, and we've been lucky. So,
Yeah.
us especially are not like Europe or a younger nation in more trouble. Oh goodness.
Mm.
But see, that's the
No,
thing with
because it's
America.
true. People can treat like there can be. I'm gonna make up a phrase here, and it might not work very well, but like there is an alternate gospel, if you will. That is this whole like screeching eagles, guns blazing, liberty.
Ronald Reagan on a velociraptor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that can turn into, and also it's very easy to turn like political allegiances and the polarization that comes with it. Like, if my ideology doesn't control the country for the next 40 years, the country will dissolve in smoke and flame and sink into the ocean. Like, you can make a lot of patriotic idols, or you can just be a patriot and still be like have God be what you worship. And we should avoid that.
Can I get a little tangential?
Please.
Little, just a
It's the
little bit.
table. Always go.
Yeah, we should be the tangential table. Oh no, just I don't know. Kind of jumping off your point and then taking a right turn. It reminded me of a conversation I had with someone today where they were like, "It's terrible. People don't know how to disagree anymore." And da 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 da. And I think, so we were talking a little bit more. And we basically came to the conclusion that in America, the culture of morality right now is a culture of choice. And that's, like we have been saying, that's our guiding principle. It connects back to freedom, that we have the freedom to choose anything, like getting Air Jordans versus Sperry's and going into massive debt for college. I just graduated, so, it's very pertinent in my mind. I'm making my first loan payment next month, and I'm terrified. But anyways, wait, where were we? Sorry.
Tangents, right?
So we have a culture of choice in the United States, and you can choose anything that you want to be. But the way we see ourselves, the way we see other people now, is kind of a compendium of all the labels that you've chosen for yourself. Like, let's say I'm a Democrat, vegan, anti Honda, Sperry wearing, yacht driving person, and those are all my labels. And so
Very
when I
specific
come up,
set of labels.
Yeah, driving.
I don't know. But when I come up into, let's say, an argument with someone, and that person doesn't wear Sperry's, they wear Chacos, and it's not like, let's
And they
talk
drive a
about
Honda.
our shoe brand and, what's right and what's wrong and how it affects our morality. Like, because I have closed-toed shoes, I have more comfortable kicking people in the shins, or I don't even know how to. Like, it's not that we're just like, ew, gross. You're different. Your labels do not overlap with my labels, and therefore you suck. Goodbye. And it's really sad, and I'm just rambling at the camera. It's so
No.
late.
It's okay.
I don't know. It makes you think about like the anthropology of the human being, right? Because in the Catholic understanding, it's all relational. We are part of the mystical body of Christ. First and foremost, before you're an American, before you're even part of your family or something, you're part of the mystical body of Christ. You've been saved by Christ on the cross. Because of this, you can know him as a friend. It's relational. That's how we see the human person. In the United States, our anthropology, we're individuals first. And these are two separate circles, and how do we get them to meet each other and to bleed into each other? Because right now, it's not great. Anyways, Julie, I'll stop.
I want to say one line. I think, and I want to make sure I'm getting your question right and say the line. So you're saying, how do we
More
be
like rants, but-
related in love instead of related in labels?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness, Father Kevin would be so proud.
Yes. But no,
No,
Maria.
for real though.
Yes.
Aiden.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Maria, to your point, that and this goes actually back to the idea of how our understanding of liberty has changed over time. That freedom originally in America was striving towards something. It was freedom towards the end of virtue, freedom towards the end of being good. And nowadays, we've taken this idea of liberty and freedom and almost commercialized it, but then also made it really,
Yeah.
really.
We have actually commercialized it.
It is.
Yeah.
Both
heinous.
right and left
Yes,
have commercialized it to a degree,
But
which
then also,
would probably make the founding fathers sick to their
Yes.
stomachs.
but aside from that, it's also become very like individualistic. It's become very personal identity focused and self-fulfillment focused. And because of that, our freedom no longer has sort of a common ground, a common direction. So, how do we have a country like that? How do we have a country, as you're saying, Maria, where everyone is in their own little sphere of individuality and their choices rule? How do we have a country that way?
Actually, I am somewhat now perplexed by the 2-year statements because I agree with you both. And Maria was speaking about labels, but we're also speaking about the individual. And the problem with when you start getting too much into labels and identities and your 14 qualifying adjectives, we're being hyperbolic here, so just roll with it. We don't need to go there. Maria makes up the labels wonderfully. Is if you put so many identifying factors on yourself, it does split you into smaller and smaller camps. And that at first seems to be in contrast with the idea of the individual, which the United States might also emphasize too much, like individualism instead of the like balancing principle in Catholicism that like you also have a duty to assist the common good.
Right.
But how is it? Like I can't reconcile these two ideas. Oh, help me out! That labels are somehow so. Like labels being so divisive into the individual. Like I'm not understanding.
I feel like it's sort of
because these are both like how
Yeah.
you have to, the way to is get away from being too individualistic and thinking only to yourself would be some kind of group identification, but then when you have the label, that somehow gets weaponized as well. I don't
Yeah.
What do we do?
It is a strange
I
paradox.
I see what you're asking.
Because I think maybe it's because it makes labels exclusive. Maybe that's the
Yeah.
problem, is that like if
Right.
we are thinking about it as a relative, as us as primarily relational, as Maria was saying, our fundamental relation is that we are saved.
Mhm.
Period. And that is a relation that applies to all of us. A fundamental relation is that we're human, and that applies to all of us. A fundamental relation is that we all share a common dignity by virtue of our humanity and by virtue of Christ's saving death. That is key to all of us. I think the problem that we get to nowadays in terms of labeling becoming individualistic is that the labels become exclusive to people who don't share them, if that makes sense.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
that's a great way to illustrate it, and I think that's a great way to identify sort of the reason we're so divided. Going back to how we got on this topic in the first place, the reason we're so divided is that people find there's been a sort of a backlash to individualism. In a sense, there's still a lot of individualism in American culture, but there's also been a rise of more collective ideas. But the problem is those collective ideas are groups primed for like irreconcilable differences. The idea of class warfare. Pick your classes there: racial, gender, sexual orientation, all of the list of controversies. But these camps are camps that have become focused on the ways they're different, and so therefore have become focused on the ways that people who can't share their experiences, the ways that people can't bridge that gap, rather than on the ways that can. And I think Jericho had a great way of illustrating that, of the right way to balance individualism and collectivism is to have a collective identity in groups that have a purpose, and have a purpose that can be shared by anyone who wants to participate in them.
I get that now because that actually you guys have made me understand. This is perfect because the problem with the labels was that I'm just restating what Aiden just said, but that like when you pit I don't know, men against women. Like, you can't, like, there is no, there is,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, the twain shall meet.
There can be no
Yeah.
if you, okay, I get it.
You lead with fundamental
Yeah.
differences.
If the
And I guess,
if the
like,
label is a difference,
yeah.
I get it.
Aiden, you look shocked at something.
Yeah, I just had a thought that
Yeah.
I think this is a great way of thinking about how Catholics can relate to America. That that our identity as Catholics, like, honestly should come first and foremost because the church has the fullness of the truth and was founded by Christ himself, and there's lots of important things
we-
going
we
on
tra-
in the church.
we
Yeah,
transcend
as
time and
great as
history.
George Washington was, he was not Jesus 2.0. Sorry
What?
for anyone who believes that. But,
No!
Yeah, sorry, Aiden.
Yes, but the point is, the way to approach politics and American life and patriotism as a Catholic is that we have something that we should be inviting other people to participate in, and something that improves the communal life of another group we're participating in, and that is the group of America. And we should be able to bring Christ's love and the ability to constructively disagree and yada, on and on and on and on. We should be able to bring these things to bear in the problems of modern political life.
Oh my! Wait, Aiden, I'm gonna wait. I just to like kind of back up what Aiden just said with the history of America, because that makes perfect sense in theory, and it also it has happened. So what happened at first with the nativism and the Catholics are going to listen to the Pope? That's when you make it two exclusive things. They were making it as if these groups couldn't overlap. And that was the problem, as we were speaking to before. But then how this works, like Aiden was just saying, is we have something to contribute. And so people might, Catholics to the country, Catholics to the common good of the society, in this case, America. And so, I mean, you can demonstrate that one way in just like all the charity work the Catholic Church does. I mean, you could, if you want to think economically, you can go to the Catholic school system because of the labor of the Catholic Church. The like sisters and cheap labor were a tremendous economic boon to this country because it took a whole lot of people and brought them to a higher class than they would have achieved. You have groups like the Knights of Columbus, Catholic Charities. Does anyone know a statistic about Catholic Charities off the top of their head?
I can look it up.
Statistic?
Like the mind-boggling.
Well, okay. I guess if you knew
charity,
it, you would have said
it.
like their mind-boggling influence in the country, and those are like the more tangible things. This is something I appreciate about Catholic. Those are some of the more tangible gains that I think should also speak to the goodness of the more salvific side, and equally important, arguably more important side of the point of Catholicism.
More important.
So, like, I just have to
I'm willing
put
to say
Aiden's
that.
point in context for my own understanding.
And
Catholic Charities has the 5th largest revenue of all charitable organizations in the U.S.
Yes.
There we go.
5th. That's crazy.
And I did just even more broadly, because this discussion of Catholicism and patriotism applies to literally every country, as well as America. And so this isn't just an American thing. I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but the Catholic Church is actually the world's largest charitable organization.
Yes.
In terms of hours served, money donated.
Yes.
Results, etc., the Catholic Church does the most charity work. Full stop. But also, I think this is the best way to address patriotism generally, because we've been really, really hard on America today. We've said some very harsh things about America, but also have some hope for the future. And I feel like G.K. Chesterton has a good way of describing the approach we should have.
As he always does.
Yes. I can't direct quote Chesterton, unfortunately, but his general point was that the patriot should treat the country like his mother. That if his mother is drunk, he does not avoid commenting on or trying to help her through her drunkenness. He loves her, he loves his country, even when she is in a poor state. But because he loves his country, he cannot leave her in the poor state.
Interesting.
All right.
And how is that different than the way we treat the church?
Oh,
is it different?
It's
well, I guess the church being drunk is a problematic image for a number of reasons.
Yes,
because secretly all the nativist Protestants were right, and the church is the whore of Babylon.
I was gonna say the image of a woman drunk and
no,
the church
Julie,
just
no,
mix.
kicked off.
I'm sorry. I had that streak in me.
In all seriousness, that is sort of a not a horrible perspective to take on the church as well. But the difference with the church is that your country isn't divinely inspired or preordained by God in the same way that the Catholic
But-
Church is.
But manifest destiny.
But salvation
Manifest
goes.
destiny.
Turned down. We discussed last week why the U.S. wasn't heaven. I think. We
Yes,
talked about
yes,
that, with
that
immigration,
did come up.
Yes.
America is not heaven. This may be news to some of you, but America is not actually the physical manifestation of heaven on earth.
Of the kingdom of,
You know,
of heaven.
this
Yeah.
could be a really good musical, though, elucidating the whole. It's like Joseph Smith 2.0, but like America, like the history of America and the trajectory of America is the way of salvation.
Ooh.
And so,
Wow.
Wow.
I don't know where you're going there, but I would.
I
not
wouldn't
watch
go
that
there. I'm
musical
just
without
saying,
reviewing
it's
badly.
not an uncommon thought.
Right, but
No, it really.
the point is, like, America has treated itself like we are, like, the way, the truth, and the life. America has spread its culture to the entire rest of the civilized world in a pretty serious
And
way.
sees it at its
Can you
duty as
imagine
an
if
enlightened
Catholics
country. Yeah.
evangelized like that today?
Yeah.
Like if instead of like the McDonald's popping up in everywhere, like you had Catholic churches popping up in everywhere.
That'd be so
Yes.
cool.
But the solution is not to turn church into a McDonald's.
Right, because-
if that's what you're wondering, that is not the way we're going. No church McDonald's. McChurches. No
Because when you
McDonald's.
embrace mixed churches, that's when you get televangelists and mega churches and the Osteens and Creflo Dollars, and that is a subject for another day.
Oh,
man.
guys, we should do evangelical prosperity gospel churches. We should. That would be fun.
Yes, but this is the Patriotism podcast, and I think we've done a pretty good
Oh,
job
sorry.
of it.
Yes.
So
I think we've done great. Yeah.
Should we end on a high note? Again, we have
We
have amazing content and terrible conclusions.
we do because we don't really want, and we want to go to the next podcast about mega
Well,
churches.
Can I give an anecdote which may or may not be a conclusion, or just to show that not even all Catholics have this figured
Alright.
out. When I came to Notre Dame, so there's a dome with the statue of Mary on the top of it, and it has a lightning rod on it. And I was walking around campus with my older brother, who is 2 years older than me and also went here. And I was like, "Oh, it's something with Mary," and he was like, "Oh yeah, the little antenna thing goes straight to the Vatican. They give directives to Jenkins, and that's how they run the whole place."
If only.
And as a freshman, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. So
Yeah, no. Just like JFK,
even
Catholics
people on this
don't.
podcast thought
Catholics don't take direct orders from the Vatican beamed into our houses.
that. I love it.
And
If we could develop that technology.
Racist commentary on Notre Dame and court cases and religious liberty.
again, that's
Oh.
yes. Notre Dame court cases, that actually could be a thing we should talk about pretty soon, because that's in the news. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
for now, Jarek, do you want to end us in prayer before we start 3 new podcasts on this one?
Sure. Thank you all for listening as always. Please pray with us the prayer of St. Thomas Aquinas, and let us begin, as we begin all things, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Grant us, O Lord, minds to know you, hearts to seek you, wisdom to find you, conduct pleasing to you, faithful perseverance in waiting for you, and a hope of finally embracing you. Amen.
Amen.